The United Nations General Assembly has backed a Palestinian bid to become a full United Nations member. The Assembly adopted a resolution on Friday with 143 votes in favor and 9 against, including the US and Israel, while 25 countries abstained. This does not give the Palestinians full United Nations membership, but recognizes them as qualified to join and recommends the United Nations Security Council reconsider the matter favorably. The vote represents a global survey of support for the Palestinian bid to become a full United Nations member, a move that would effectively recognize a Palestinian state after the United States vetoed it in the United Nations Security Council last month. While it does not grant a vote in the body, the draft resolution will give the Palestinians some additional rights and privileges from September 2024, like a seat among the United Nations members in the Assembly Hall.
I have stood hundreds of times before at this podium, but never for a more significant vote than the one about to take place, a historic one. A yes vote is a vote for Palestinian existence. It is not against any state, but it is against the attempts to deprive us of our state. That is why the Israeli government is so opposed to it, because they oppose our independence and the two-state solution altogether.
The Russian ambassador to the United Nations, Vasily Nevencia, stressed that the resolution is an opportunity to correct the historical injustice experienced by the Palestinian people.
It would usually require a careful study of the case. However, it is a question of granting additional rights not to just anyone, but to Palestine, who, due to the United States' stance, has had to be satisfied with partial membership in the United Nations after the adoption of this draft. However, it would have the opportunity to participate more effectively in the work of the United Nations and the meetings that take place under its chairmanship. We see in them the opportunity to correct the historical injustice suffered by the Palestinian people, who have lost an unprecedented number of civilians in the last 7 months as a result of Israeli actions, which have been covered up by the United States, as it has been doing for the last few years.
In this context, the government of Venezuela, through a communique, celebrated the diplomatic victory of Palestine in the United Nations organization, stating, "The Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela celebrates the diplomatic victory of courageous Palestinian people in the United Nations General Assembly, where the peoples and governments of the world have made it clear by an overwhelming majority that Palestine must be admitted as a United Nations member." In another paragraph, it is stated, Venezuela recalled that it has been the isolated, arbitrary and unjust position of the United States, which as a permanent member of the Security Council has abused its right to veto and its position of power, which has prevented for now the entry of Palestine as a full member, and therefore urges this country to recognize and abide by the mandate of the General Assembly immediately. Finally, the government stressed the Bolivarian government joins the demand for a ceasefire and an immediate and unconditional halt to the genocide, urging international justice to determine the responsibilities for the crimes against humanity committed by the State of Israel. The Israeli War Cabinet decided to expand the operation against the city of Rafah amid growing tensions and international scrutiny. The Israeli War Cabinet unanimously approved the deepening of military operations against the Rafah governorate, despite the suspension of arms shipments by U.S. President Joe Biden. The cabinet instructed Israeli negotiators to continue talks for the release of Israeli prisoners. On the other hand, White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre indicated that Washington will not totally halt the supply of missiles to Israel. On Friday, the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestine Refugees, UNRWA, temporarily closed its headquarters in East Jerusalem after being attacked by Israeli extremists who set fire to the perimeter of the facility. Addressing the situation, Philippe Lazzarini, head of the agency, affirmed on social networks that the complex was attacked twice, describing the event as scandalous and stating it posed a serious risk to the staff. Lazzarini highlighted that in the last few months, the agency's workers have been regularly harassed and threatened with firearms. The UNRWA executive also stated the headquarters will not be reopened until security is restored in the area. These attacks come after Israeli authorities claimed that agency workers were linked to Hamas. The U.S. Department of State reported that Biden administration is apparently concerned about an Israeli military raid in Rafah.
What the president made clear is that we have concerns about a potential military operation in Rafah. I don't think that's any secret. We've been making those concerns known publicly, and we have made those concerns quite clear to the government of Israel. And as the president noted, there are certain types of military assistance that we will not make available to Israel for use in a campaign in Rafah.
The Turkish government reiterates the suspension of its trade relations with Israel until a permanent ceasefire in the Gaza Strip is reached. The announcement was made by Turkey's Minister of Commerce, Ömer Bolat, who publicly rejected the Israeli foreign minister's statements that Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan had ordered the lifting of the trade restrictions. Bolat reiterated that the suspension will remain in force until Israel stops its genocide against Palestine and allows humanitarian access to its population. The Conference of Rectors of Spanish Universities CRU issued a public statement in which rectors of 77 universities conditioned their relations with Israel institutions. The higher studies centers between public and private committed themselves to suspend or review their relations with Israeli academic institutions that do not entirely dissociate themselves from the offensive in the Gaza Strip, in addition to reaffirming their commitment to international humanitarian law. The CRU, which brings together 50 public and 27 private institutions,